Welcome. You have found us. This is the RIoT Underground. This is the place where you can come to hear from the instigators that are changing the world with disruptive technology. Really excited to have Don Shin, the founder and CEO of CrossComm, in the studio with us tonight. Don, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So one question I didn't prep you for, I'm going to stump you right off the bat, but many of our listeners are just listening online. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching the recording, you see us here. We're set up at Raleigh Founded. We're thankful to them for donating the space for us to record this. But for those that are just listening, that maybe want to have a visual of who they're listening to, if you had a chance to cast yourself in your story in the future, who would you want to play Don Shin?
Oh, gosh. The first person that comes to mind, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. It was Christopher Reeve, because I just watched the recent Superman movie, and it made me think about how Superman was my first role model and hero, and how he had, that fictitious character had such a powerful influence on my life.
That's a fantastic guess. And you're our first ever Christopher Reeve, I think, on the program. So excited to have you. That aside, glad to have you here. Start off just a little bit of an introduction for our audience. Who is Don? Who is CrossComm?
Yeah, so my name's Don Shin. I am the founder and CEO of CrossComm. We're an emerging technology consultancy that I founded actually as an undergrad at Duke University 27 something years ago, quite a while back then. We weren't building LLM powered apps. We weren't building mobile apps. We were building websites on Netscape. Well, it was really me out of my college dorm, building websites on Netscape 1.1 and trying to make a business out of it because it was something that I immediately knew in my heart I wanted to do, and get into not just technology consulting, but emerging technology consulting, where I could constantly give myself the excuse to stay on the cutting edge and learn interesting things and stay curious.
Really cool. So you start this company to do just that, to stay on the cutting edge of emerging technologies. You've seen a lot of technology shifts over the years. Tell us a little bit about those, and then do you see the current shift into this, as we call it, the data economy and the automation of everything through AI? Do you see similarities in this shift, or is this shift different?
This shift is definitely different. So, like I said, got my teeth cut on building websites. From there, went to building mobile apps, augmented and virtual reality apps, apps that leveraged edge computing, IoT devices, large language model powered features. But I see the acceleration of AI really as almost like the end game of custom software development. It's kind of where it's all coming to a head. And I think that it's definitely challenging me to rethink, what does CrossComm fundamentally do, and how does it actually offer value to the world? And so I'm challenging myself to think of CrossComm as more of an emerging technology consultancy rather than a software development studio, which I sometimes fall into the habit of because I love building products so much. But what does CrossComm, my company, look like in a world where prompts can build software just as easily as human beings? We're not there yet, but we definitely see a trajectory in that direction. So yeah, it's definitely disrupting a lot and making me think a lot about business models.
I want to ask some about that, but before we get into the nuances of AI, look back, let's say at the start, you're building websites. There's a point where website development is automated enough that that's not a great business to be in, right? So you move to the next thing. And how do you know when to get out of something?
Part of it is that when things are hard, they were challenging, and when things are challenging, they're kind of interesting for me. And so when I was developing websites out of my college dorm, I was writing HTML and CSS by hand, JavaScript by hand. And even after I adopted certain libraries like jQuery, Web 2.0 trends, backends, it was still hard enough. And then after enough automation happened, it's kind of like, well, two things happened. Firstly, the skill of website development got commoditized very quickly. I was charging in the year 2000, I was charging like $160 to $180 per hour for website development. And the more it got automated, the more it got commoditized. And it also got more boring. So we ended up looking at new challenges, and whether it be mobile app development, AR, VR, XR, et cetera. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. If I'll rephrase it, it sounds like it's a combination of the business case isn't as strong, but maybe even more so, it just wasn't interesting to you
Yeah,
because you wanted to do something new.
I think it was both in equal measure. Yeah. And, one of the things that I've realized I've done a pretty good job of over the past 25 years is hopping on the next tech train and figuring out what are the emerging trends, where is the industry going, what's the next transformation. I've now seen several technology transformations in my career, from websites to web app 2.0, web 2.0 web apps to mobile apps and mobile computing, and then back-end cloud platforms, and now large language models. And so, but yeah, this one definitely feels different.
One of the struggles that I saw in my days in corporate, I worked for about 20 years in big multinational companies, technology companies, it was that you'd launch some products, you'd make $1 bajillion off of them. And so you would just then evolve the products, even though you could see a new technology would enable you to do something really, really new. But in order to do that, you had to kind of cannibalize your existing revenue to create that other revenue. And that's scary to like turn down sales. Right? How do you approach that mindset shift to say, we actually have to disrupt the business if we're going to do things different?
Yeah, it's almost like you're giving an ad for a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. Are you familiar with it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the book basically explains why large businesses tend not to adopt innovation because it ends up cannibalizing their existing money trees. And that leaves room for disruptive organizations to then leapfrog them, and old companies can sometimes go to the wayside if they're not careful. I think with AI, another reason why it's different is because I have not yet encountered a serious business that is disregarding AI in that respect. I think every business that I have encountered is taking AI seriously. They may not necessarily be far along in their adoption. They may not necessarily have their AI strategy all figured out or a game plan for integrating it into their product or their organization. But I have yet to meet anyone who has experienced the technology and said, this is something I can ignore.
Are you seeing common threads of how they're deploying AI? And are they the right areas to be focusing on?
So far, well, in the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of prototypes. In Fortune 500 companies, I think the vast majority of them are now prototyping or deploying AI agents to do office work. And I think that the gap between companies staying in the prototype stage and actually moving AI agents into production is actually widening. In other words, companies that are taking it seriously enough to like put those prototypes in production are pretty much leaving their cohorts behind. And so it tells me we're going to start to see a tremendous competitive gap between companies that are serious and committed towards deploying AI and companies that were, doing prototypes because, like websites, they were told they need a website, so they're going to build a website and deploy it. And like AI, in a similar fashion, companies are deploying or prototyping with and experimenting with AI, but they may not fully understand or are empowering their teams on how to use it productively.
Help folks that are in an organization thinking about becoming serious and committed. Like, what does that look like? What are those behaviors or the activities that are happening?
AI is going to be not just a technology and a data shift, but a change management shift through organizations. It's really going to change how organizations do their business. It's one thing to have a strategy on how to adopt AI in an organization, and it's another thing to ask, how is AI going to actually change my overall business model and my business strategy. And so what I've observed is a lot of companies are jumping on the bandwagon and telling their teams, you've got to experiment with AI, you got to adopt AI and just start getting, mass team subscriptions to software like ChatGPT or Claude Desktop, but they're really not providing any guidance on how to actually use it and be effective with it. And so these software subscriptions end up getting unused because, frankly, leadership that actually made the decision to adopt AI is not really firsthand familiar with what AI can do themselves. And so they provide a mandate without necessarily providing any of like the steps to actually execute on the mandate. So to answer your question, like one of the things that organizations need to do is that their leadership actually needs to be committed to being fluent in AI first, so that they can actually say, not just use AI, but okay, here are the specific ways it's been helpful because I firsthand am familiar with the technology.
It sounds like it's really important for top-down kind of decision-making leadership driving these kind of initiatives. True, or is it more bottom-up? As long as you put just the right AI policy in place, you can instill just an experimental culture and you let people create and experiment, and then the best ideas distill up to the top.
I don't see why it can't be both. And in fact, I would say it has to be both. So I don't imagine a company successfully adopting AI if the leadership doesn't actually understand what the technology is useful for. And so if there is a conviction that the technology is going to be transformative, leadership has to, no pun intended, take the lead in understanding how that technology can be applied to office work, to day-to-day life, and just be committed to exposure to it. And that needs to happen in tandem with encouraging your team to do those kind of experiments, because at the end of the day, have you heard of a scenario in a company where maybe people are hiding from their bosses the fact that they're using ChatGPT? Why would they be hiding that they're using AI? Shouldn't they actually be commended for it? Shouldn't they actually be praised for trying something innovative? Well, they're hiding it maybe because there's some corporate governance issues that need to be worked out, but that's a culture issue, and culture issues only change if leadership is actually open to prioritizing the accommodation of AI in their organization.
I was listening to a story, I believe it was on NPR this morning, maybe, but commenting on the use of AI in the medical field. Doctors using LLMs to help them make diagnoses, do things that really isn't FDA cleared yet.
Yeah.
But using that kind of as a metaphor, how do you help folks to overcome the concern that, like, I want to use these tools, but we don't want customer data leakage, we don't want issues. Maybe I need to be careful.
Yeah. Healthcare is a little bit different because healthcare is highly regulated. But it gets back to who's in leadership and who makes the regulations. I'm going to take a little bit of a diversion here.
Yeah.
Leadership taking the lead on understanding technology is essential for us to be able to harness this technology correctly. I'm not fully convinced that our politicians even understand what this technology is capable of and how it's going to impact society. And that's my biggest beef about leadership in this world, is that I don't get a sense that they use technology on a day-to-day basis. From what I hear, both ChatGPT and Claude have now offered government discounts on being able to use their services. And part of me thinks that's actually a good thing, because I think the more exposure they can have to the technology, the more they can understand both the positive and the negative implications of what this technology has to offer once it becomes proliferated. But with like a scenario like healthcare, there are ways to use the technology privately and with data security, it's not an axiom that to use LLM technology, you have to give up your privacy. It is not unconditional truth that you have to have insecure systems in order to leverage large language models. So smart people can figure that out if there is enough willpower to do so. And I, for one, would rather see this amazing technology actually adopted in the kind of industries that are committed to public good, like healthcare, first, because, you know, wouldn't it be sad if we used the best of our technology that humanity could create just for the benefit of making more money versus helping people's lives on a down to earth level?
One area that can impact all of our lives is bringing this powerful technology into the public sector. And at RIoT, we do a lot of work with municipalities on smart city initiatives, a lot of economic development initiatives. And I was speaking to a CIO about a year ago, and in this town, they were working on their AI policy because they wanted their teams to use all these tools. And they got policies in place that they thought were in the public interest, maintaining privacy and the things that are important from a public sector perspective, but also enabling enough that like it took the handcuffs off, that the team could go, and they weren't getting a lot of traction from the team in using it. And as they dug in a little more, the CIO's opinion was that a lot of it was that the team was worried if they showed how well AI could do their job, that it would take their job.
That's understandable and so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, you know, the fact of the matter is AI is going to change all of our jobs. If you work in a white collar profession, if you work in an office, AI is going to change my job, and I'm having to deal with the implications of that and the jobs of my team members. I think what happens in the long term, that's still debatable. And if I had to guess, I guess that in the future, AI is going to be able to do a lot of the things that human beings do today. Then there is the shorter time frame, but no one knows, by the way, when that time frame is going to exactly arrive. No one knows when AGI is going to arrive, when super intelligence is going to arrive, going to be able to replace the job of, say, a CEO to make decisions on how to run corporations, or how to take on huge amounts of responsibility in managing society. But let's talk about the short term, right? Here, today, tomorrow, the next year, I see artificial intelligence and large language models as capable, and AI agents as capable of actually removing the most boring aspects of our jobs. Because what constitutes boring work? Anyone want to volunteer what makes work boring? Repetition? How about mindless thinking, or like mindless drudgery? What else is boring in our jobs? Quality checking, just like the same thing over and over again that you feel like I could train someone with a lot less qualifications than me to do potentially. What else is boring? I would posit that AI agents right now with their current capabilities are actually primed and optimized to replace boring out of our jobs. Because everything that you guys just said are the natural candidates where AI agents excel. Doing repetitive work, handling drudgery, being able to focus your attention on something, even if it's like mind-numbing work, an AI agent can still maintain 100% attention to evaluate inputs. So what I'm hoping for, and certainly this is the optimistic case, is that AI agents aren't going to necessarily replace positions immediately as much as they are going to replace aspects of each and every one of our positions, so that we can spend the limited attention that we have and the limited energy that we have on the decisions in our jobs that require the most intense focus. Optimistic? Maybe. I hope so.
Yeah. I think, for anyone in the audience that's thinking about where to apply this and how to build trust with the team, what you just described is the perfect strategy. Let's start by taking the work that people don't like to do off of their back so that they can focus on things that are more motivating, just as you've done your whole career. Once it's not that interesting, let's move on to something that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this posits that there is enough interesting work in the world for us to do, but we all know that there's a whole ton of problems in the world that require solving if someone just had the time and the energy to solve them. And so, that gets to thoughts about what kind of world I think my children are going to live in. I have 4 children, by the way, ages 13 to 7. And I'm concerned. I have a lot of anxiety as a parent about what kind of value they're going to offer the world and where they're going to find meaning. And I think what it's going to require in order for them to have problems that that they can solve is for them to have an entrepreneurial mindset. Not necessarily that they're all running their own company. My wife and I had an intense conversation about this the other day. And it's just like, Don, are you saying that they all need to be entrepreneurs? No, they don't need to run their own businesses, but I want all of my children to have an entrepreneurial mindset, whether they work in a big corporation, a small business, or as a freelancer or whatever they're doing, because I think people, this gets back to the question, what are AI agents not going to replace in 10 to 20 years? I think they're not going to replace the ability to accept responsibility and to bear responsibility for work. I think that AI agents are still not going to provide the same kind of human presence as a human by definition. And so I want my children to have entrepreneurial skills and to be self-starters, to have initiative, to problem solve, and to embrace the power of soft skills and communication. Because I think if they have that suite of skills, they're going to be able to find their way, figure out how to provide value in a world that I won't fully be able to predict. I'm not so convinced that head knowledge at this point is going to save them and continue to maintain their relevance. But those are my 2 cents. I'd be curious to hear what other people think.
It's really interesting, and we talked about this previously, this idea that for the last at least 2 decades, 3 decades, there's been this intense focus in the educational system towards STEM. And what I'm hearing is, soft skills, entrepreneurial thinking, that's the ticket to future success, because maybe the STEM is being automated.
Isn't that ironic? It's ironic because I'm a child of formal STEM education. I mean, I mentioned Duke University. I got a major in computer science, a minor in music, and a certificate in film and video. So I'm definitely, I was definitely bought into the world of credentials. And my parents were, or else they wouldn't have bankrolled, the whole educational tuition. But, well, firstly, the cost of higher education has outpaced inflation tremendously over the past 20 years. That in itself, I think, requires some reflection by society and figuring out what's the deal with that. Why is that so? And also, does anyone remember what they learned in undergrad? I can tell you there's only one class that I truly remember what I learned in undergrad, and that's ballroom dancing. And interestingly enough, it's the one that was most related to motor skills, and maybe that's why I remember it so much. But all of the head knowledge I learned, all of that information, I had to relearn more modern versions of that information along the way. And now I just reference what, my pocket calculator called Claude installed on my phone. And so whenever I want to learn something new, I'll just ask Claude and get information that way. So
there was a time when the ultimate credential was the college degree.
Yes.
Right. And there were, even today, there are, certain glass ceilings you don't get through if you don't have a degree. although that's changing. I think it's changing very, very quickly. You shared an interesting thought, if you're willing to share with me, about how you're thinking about college savings for your children.
Yeah. Firstly, um, I will hire, well, all things being equal, I would love a person with a degree in computer science to be one of my software engineers, all things being equal. But I would pick a self-starter that had demonstrative initiative over someone with credentials any day of the week. A self-starter and someone with demonstrated history of being able to do things on their own. In order for me to send my kids to the same university I attended, I think it costs like somewhere like $320,000. And I thought to myself, gosh, if I did have that money, and I'm not saying I do, but if I did have that money to send every one of my kids to private university, what if I just actually funded their first startup business and enabled them to, you know, take a swing at things or fail spectacularly, and encourage them to actually, or enable them to actually gain experience starting something, because we all know that failure is not failure. Failure is actually success if you view it as a learning lesson towards your next step in your career. So, I don't know, again, if my children are going to have the disposition to start their own business, but I sure hope they start something. And I sure hope they're not afraid to start something, whether it's in the context of a small business or within like entrepreneurship or at a large corporation starting a new initiative. Because I think those are the things that people are going to find difficult to lean on AI for.
Failure with genuine effort behind it is accelerated learning, like full stop. It is the best learning that you can have. And so I think it's really interesting. And $320,000 is a lot of money for a credential that increasingly isn't maybe seen the way it was. And so it's interesting. There is a social aspect to the university experience for many people as well. And you talk about soft skills being important. Are there hacks that you've thought about on the soft skills side?
Gosh, I would love to hear from the audience on this one.
Well, I'm asking my 14-year-old to read How to Win Friends with People. And it's like pulling teeth getting into reading. We'd much rather clip it.
I don't know if I have any like pithy hacks or tips, but I will say, if our kids are actually losing the ability to communicate face to face because of digital devices, then the kids who do have those skills are going to stick out and be even more impressive as a result. And so I think that certainly speaks to, I guess, the weight and the priority that it places on soft skills and communication.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the simple hacks we've done forever anyway are back to your motor skills, like youth sports, things you're off the screen, you're building relationships, you're learning to work as a team, all those kind of things. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the world continues to evolve. Go ahead.
I don't know, I just think it's ironic because, let me tell you, I was not the jock in school. I was more cerebral types growing up. And so I was all about the revenge of the nerds. And here I am hoping that my kids are actually sociable and popular and prioritize spending time with other people. So
I did hear you crushed it on the dance floor, though.
my wife and I, we took the ballroom dancing together, actually.
There you go. That's great.
Yes.
All of this is happening at an unprecedented pace.
Yeah.
Or at least that's
Yeah.
as the story goes. Actually, when you rewind a little bit and you see how long, neural networks and machine learning and everything's been going on, it maybe isn't as fast as we think. But to stay with that basis, how much of your time do you spend just staying abreast of what's happening?
Oh, God. By the way, I apologize if I'm bombarding with you all with like super serious material. I should have like started with a preparatory joke or an opening story or something. But I guess it also just speaks to just how heavy this subject is in all of our lives, right? It's just like, you know, I have a bit of an anxiety about the whole thing, and I'm doing it for a living. I think that maybe I wouldn't be as anxious if I didn't have kids, but I spend more than half of my time, even as the leader of my company, more than half of my time keeping up with AI developments and new trends and new capabilities. Sometimes I'm spending that time pioneering for the sake of my team, and I introduce them to those concepts in like internal lunch and learns and internal AI hackathons and stuff. But it's been like a full-time job and then some, and probably spending maybe equal to the amount of a full-time job if I count all the time outside of work hours that I spend on just keeping up with things. It's unprecedented. It's such an overused word, but truly is unprecedented, because like in all those technology transformations I described throughout the past 25 plus years, nothing has been moving at this kind of a pace.
You're spending a lot of your time now as your business is pivoting into helping to educate, helping to train, helping to steer leadership to know how to deploy these kinds of tools in their organizations, helping to then train their staff to use the tools. How much of that effort, that consultative effort that you provide, is focused on like the what and the how versus maybe the why and the culture of continuous experimentation and learning? You know, help us, like what does the curriculum that you work on often look like?
Yeah, so to elaborate on what Tom's referring to, so CrossComm has historically been doing custom software development for organizations that need it. And we've been increasingly doing more AI strategy consulting, AI readiness audits, AI corporate training, and helping business teams use off-the-shelf AI tools, and even basic things like prompt engineering, which I think is going to be the next generation of word processing. Everyone's going to have to know how to do it in order to get any kind of office job whatsoever, as well as training software development teams on agentic coding techniques and how to use large language models to vibe code and accelerate their coding efforts. So I really think there's definitely a need for like super practical applied training of like, just tell me how to prompt engineer so I can get the results that I need and increase the productivity that my CEO is looking for. But I also think some just basic fluency in what the technology does and how it actually operates. Like to understand that AI is not magic. Large language models are just machine learning models that do prediction of the next token over and over again until it produces some kind of output. And so when you understand that it's just a prediction engine, that there's no inherent intelligence in large language models other than the intelligence encoded in the knowledge it was trained on, you start to understand why large language models do math horribly, right? Because why would a prediction engine do token prediction well if we're talking about fractional math and log, log n of this number or something like that? If you were to ask ChatGPT or Claude what the log base 5 of a fractional number that had like 10 numbers past the decimal was, you're going to get a different answer every single time because it's a token prediction engine. And I explained that because once you understand that, you start to develop an intuition as to what kind of problems LLMs will solve well and immediately provide value and what they won't. Because after I'm gone out of a corporate training, yeah, they know how to do 2 or 3 use cases that I've spelled out and they've rehearsed together. But my hope is that people would have a general fluency in the why behind the what so that they can start to figure out the use cases on their own and start to run with things and come back to me a year later and say, Don, you wouldn't believe what we were able to get LLMs to do. Oh, and I tried this and it totally didn't work. So that's what I'm hoping for.
What can you suggest? Is there something you could suggest for anyone that's listening to this podcast that they should be doing if they're not already to be a part of this future? When you talk about prompt engineering being as simple as word processing, like all of us know how to write emails or edit a document, what is going to be the minimum bar that we all need to be able to do, or that we should be preparing for, whether we like this topic or not, because you just have to know how to use a smartphone, for example, right?
Yeah. So I definitely believe core basic skills of prompt engineering is going to become mandatory for my children and the world that we're about to enter into. It means like understanding the difference between a 0-shot, 1-shot, or multi-shot prompt, or to understand where, that context is king, and that in order to get the LLM to give you the output you want, just like instructing an intern, you don't just say, go do this, and then you're expecting good results. You have to actually be really meticulous about your instructions, and also understand that there's a whole bunch of context that we already know when operating. Tom, you and I have interacted with each other for years now. So there's a lot that I know about you that I've forgotten that I already know about you. But it influences the kind of answers that I give to you when we interact. And so to be able to offer appropriate, thorough context on who I am, I always let Claude and ChatGPT know who I am, what my priorities are, what's important to me, and what kind of output I expect. And then offer, in addition to that context, the problem I'm trying to solve, so that it speaks to me in a way that's appropriate for that context. I am a busy CEO who's only interested in strategic information about AI, such and such and such and such, and I want my information formatted in such a way. Those are all skills that I think that everyone should understand. And then the second thing is understanding the difference between AI assistants and AI agents. To date, most of us are familiar with using ChatGPT and Claude as AI assistants, basically like the way we continue to use Google. What is this? Tell me about this. Give me an answer to this. That's all about information retrieval and knowledge augmentation, whereas AI agents is about getting the LLMs to actually make decisions for you so that they can accomplish work for you. Once I was able to reproduce agentic behavior on my own, a light bulb turned on, and then I saw where things were going. So if you haven't played around with agentic behavior and getting an LLM to actually make decisions or perform work on your behalf, I strongly suggest you give that a shot through either ChatGPT or Claude with MCP servers, so that a light bulb will turn on. You'll start to realize, wow, a lot of the repetitive work and the boring work that has made my job a drudgery can actually be done by computers now.
Really interesting perspective. In a moment, we're going to open to the audience. I want to hear some questions for y'all, so prepare. Before we do, we're going to do a little bit of a lightning round that we do every podcast. And before we do that, please let any of our listeners know, how can they reach you, or how can they reach CrossComm?
Sure. So CrossComm's website is CrossComm.com. And the easiest way to actually get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. My LinkedIn handle is Don Shin 1, DONSHIN number 1. And you can get connected with me and message me through there. And my email address is don.shin@crosscomm.com.
So lightning round, you're going to get, it's pretty simple. You're going to get a couple of quick questions. You can answer one or the other. No right or wrong answers. The audience will judge if it was a right or wrong answer. So there is kind of a right or wrong answer, but we'll start with some easy stuff. Chemistry or physics?
Ooh, physics.
Physics. Max headroom or HAL 9000?
Max headroom, definitely.
Max headroom, yeah. I'm not going to try and do an impression on that. And most of our audience may not even know the
People
reference.
won't even know Max headroom. Yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. RAG or MCP?
Both. RAG through MCP. It's like It's funny, all of the AI seminars in the tech conferences were about RAG a year ago. And now it's not that RAG isn't relevant, it's just that RAG is sort of just like a given. It's just, you're gonna retrieve the right context, and that's what context engineering is about. Prompt engineering is about crafting, a nice prompt on your own. Context engineering, you might have heard this new phrase, is all about how to systematically and programmatically generate the right context to solve the right problems so that you can then allow automated agentic systems to happen. So RAG through MCP.
So you answered this one before, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer differently now that we know your thoughts around soft skills and entrepreneurship. But Revenge of the Nerds or Animal House?
I'm still Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, that's all right. AGI or quantum?
AGI.
AGI. Is that more powerful? Comes first? How do you judge that?
I think I was thinking more about its relevance on society.
Yeah.
I think that what do you do when super intelligence demonstrably is able to manage government and even societies better than human beings? What does that mean to human beings? And do we become their domestic pets? Do we, what does that mean? So I think AGI is going to have more impact.
And we'll wrap up. Data economy, opportunity or risk?
Still think opportunity.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic about the future, despite the uncertainty that change brings about, and the inevitable change that we're going to have to manage through. Let's hear from the audience.
Greetings, gentlemen. I just want to thank you for the excellent job, Dr. Alanuia. Want you to look at it from Jensen Hogg's perspective when he suggests that low code or no code and not advising his children to learn how to code and being able to have domain expertise and allow the tools to be able to do things for you. I think the reason why that's important in context is because of communication skills. I have 10 grandchildren, and I often tell my children and them, that says, listen, at some point you have to unplug from the matrix, because if you don't unplug, some of these kids will have a fit. So can you just briefly speak to Jensen's philosophy, if you will, in terms of AI and how you see that impacting, particularly those of us who are not native coders? And I'm not saying coding is going to be obsolete. What I'm saying is the context of how we code is going to be different when we look at scale.
So what does the word code mean? Like when I say I speak in code, what does that mean? It means it's something that needs to be deciphered, right? And so code communicates something, but so does English. What if you could actually code business requirements for software with English or whatever is the language you're most comfortable with? And so, yeah, I wouldn't discourage my kids from learning how to code, because I think it's also a good thought exercise when you're coding on your own, but I don't know if I would encourage my kids to pursue coding for a living right now. I think what's more important is understanding the why behind the what, to be able to think through entrepreneurial questions like, what is product? Well, product is something that someone's willing to pay money for and sees economic value in. And so start thinking of ways to solve those problems. I think product people are going to have more valuable and irreplaceable skills and perspective than just pure coding.
I'll add too. I think that it's important to remember that there's a tremendous number of things that we want our children to do and to learn that have nothing to do with their future gainful employment. And so if coding is something that just catches their fascination and it teaches them curiosity, it teaches them to learn, it teaches them just to be excited about trying to make things, like I made a lot of, stick forts in the backyard and bicycle jumps and stuff. I didn't become a civil engineer, but I learned a little bit about how the world works. And so, just encourage your children to pursue their dreams, whatever they are, even if it doesn't mean that job type will be there in the future.
That's a great point. Is the purpose of education to teach us how to think, or is it to prepare us for having to be employable? And the two are not necessarily the same. I think coding is a great exercise for teaching someone how to think. But I was just speaking with someone else in the audience about how using AI and things like Google Maps actually make us dumber. They make us more spatially dumb when you use Google Maps. And continued use of LLMs actually starts to potentially allow critical thinking skills to atrophy. And so, the question is, but at the same time, AI is making people more productive. So should education involve how to use AI and to be more productive, even at the cost of critical thinking? Those are all questions that we need to wrestle with.
Hey, when we think of these far states of AI, like running the government better than humans and so on, we imagine the chart goes up and to the right without physical limits. And being a physics guy, you can probably appreciate there's always a physical limit, cost, processing time, latency, et cetera. Like, what do you see getting removed out of that equation to make AI all powerful or all knowing or all able to do some of these bigger, more complex things?
The cost of electricity, I think, is a huge bottleneck. And so whichever country focuses on getting electricity cost affordable is probably going to win the AI wars. Because, well, when I think of the AI wars, I think basically US and China. And both the US and China have great AI companies creating great foundation models. DeepSeek in China, and got ChatGPT and Claude Desktop, Claude Sonnet. But in order to agentify a lot of the work done in this economy, we're going to have to increase our electrical capacity tremendously in this country, and so will China. And so it's going to be a race to be able to increase our electricity capacity tremendously for both of those countries.
In that specific space, China is way ahead of the United States. I mean, way ahead. There's actually a great article in Forbes right now about how far ahead they are in providing electricity for data centers. So if that's the case, at least over the next decade, the race might already be won. But I think there will be more to it than just that.
Yeah. It's definitely not the only factor. And glad that NVIDIA is based out of the US. Glad that we have and glad that cutting edge chip fabrication is happening in Taiwan. But electricity is a big factor.
Do you see any environmental impact from AI, meaning the amount of solar farms that are going to power these AI machines? Do you see any environmental impact?
Do I see any
Environmental
impact? Well, I think the investment in increased electricity capacity is going to definitely have an environmental impact, for sure. Because where is this energy going to be produced, and where's it going to come from? So, I mean, again, I kind of speak from the heart on these matters. I think it's, I wish our current government leadership was more interested in an all of the above approach to generating electricity from solar, wind, tidal currents, as well as fossil fuels. But I happen to drive an electric car, and it's funny, for years, the big skepticism around electric cars was like, one of the big skepticisms was, where is all the energy infrastructure going to come from? Don't think about the electric cars, think about AI, and how are we going to generate that kind of electricity in a way that preserves the environment? So I've, for quite some time, been a big proponent of renewable energy sources, and it's just a shame that we're underinvesting in that relative to the kind of aspirations we need to have with regards to AI and electric vehicles.
I'm typically someone who is a little bit of a skeptic on pure capitalism. I think that most markets are not really free markets, and so capitalism in its purest form doesn't necessarily apply. But in this area, I think there is some hope, because really all the big AI platforms are privately held. And therefore, there are investors, whether it's a for-profit, a nonprofit, doesn't matter. There's investors that put millions and millions of dollars and are expecting a financial return, and energy is expensive. So while AI is a massive energy hog today and will be for the foreseeable future, that's an engineering problem that will be solved. I don't know how, but it will be solved, because the companies are going to lose too much money paying for the electricity. I'm much more worried about things like AI, giving false news and being trained on bad data, and because there's not the financial incentive to fix truth in data. But the energy stuff, it's going to hit profitability so much that one way or another it'll get solved. And I think renewables is where it'll be. In China, it's a lot of solar and it's a lot of nuclear, and we're not doing enough of either of those things in the US.
I have a quick question. Anyone else really annoyed that like 50% of the content on Facebook is all AI generated and fake? It's just like, I took a 10-year hiatus from Facebook just to kind of like get away from the toxicity. And then I get back on for business purposes to post on social media. And then I'm just hooked into the novelty machine of a whole bunch of AI content and AI slop. And it's now just starting to really annoy me because I can't avoid it. Just like AI generated videos, it's just, and people sharing these videos as if they're real. It's just, anyways. Yeah.
Okay, this is a two-part. Oh, and let's not forget about clean water, which we're running really low on, and those things really need them. So we might be able to generate electricity, but we're running out of water. Okay, so that was my question. My question was, when organizations get ready to embrace AI, I mean, we don't have a choice, we have to. Where can they go? Where's the help? We can do Google, and Google spits out 14 different things. You have to educate yourself on what those things are and then apply them to help your organization. First question. Second question is, once the organization embraces AI, they'll have people within the organization to be the AI experts, so to speak. Where did those people go in order to get the things they need to help the organization that's needing help? So first, where's the organization gonna go? And then where's the people that are interested gonna go?
Can I give a real quick plug? So there's this organization that I created called CrossComm, and it provides AI training. I did not set you up for that question, but that is what I've committed the next chapter of my professional career doing, is helping organizations figure out how to ethically and safely and productively deploy AI. First with using off-the-shelf AI tools, as well as modifying or adapting their business strategy for AI and thinking about how it could be incorporated into their products. So certainly I'm not the only company and the only individual around doing that. But I was also having a conversation with someone earlier today in this room about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And this is related to AI because there's two ways this all turns out. One is a utopian version of the future, and one is a dystopian version of the future. And it could be a mix of both, but we're all rooting for the utopian outcome, but we're scared that that our society's demons are pushing us more towards the dystopian future. And but in the utopian version, we don't have enough work to do, and so we're all having more time freed up to be able to pursue our passions, our interests, our hobbies, or our pet projects, or solving other problems of the world. And one thing that AI is not going to solve is giving meaning to our lives. And I think that one of the things that I, still find meaning in why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I find meaning in helping people. And so that's kind of more of a direct answer to your question, but also a challenge to us all is that even if AI solves all of our problems, we're still going to have to find meaning in this world. And meaning is what we make out of it in our lives, whether we pursue the utopian or the dystopian version of the future.
I'll double down quickly, like hire Don if you have the ability, like not just because he has this expertise, but because he's in it for the right reason, right? But another, it's going to sound a little bit maybe like a silly response, but use the AI. Like ask the AI, what should I be doing? How should I be proceeding? What steps do I have? It's amazing how much the tool will help you learn how to get started and to use the tool itself. So don't be afraid to go in from the very start saying, I want to augment my abilities with this tool. I'm not sure how, so ask the tool for help. And it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to make no secret. It's not like I know knowledge that no one else knows. And sometimes you can ask the AI for prompt advice. It's like, how should I prompt you better? If I want this kind of outcome, you gave me a really poor outcome. What should I do or say differently in order to get a better outcome? You can get a lot of mileage out of asking large language models how to prompt large language models better.
And be kind to it along the way so that you're training the AI to be kind. Other questions?
Thank you for everything, first of all. You said earlier that you think that we should be using AI mostly for the tedious types of tasks and stuff like that. But when you think about like the evolution of just society and everything in jobs, do you see our leadership eventually being at a disadvantage or lesser quality than they are now because they didn't do it all themselves like they are now, kind of gaining some of that insight and doing it and working it, and some of that is building up their toughness to go through that tediousness. Now, if it's handed to them, do you think that's going to change the quality of their leadership and maybe even their just their innate knowledge and work ethic?
I would rather have leaders that actually know AI and grew up with AI, because this is going to have such huge implications on society, on employment, on, whether or not we need to explore things like universal basic income, or whether or not there needs to be regulation or a token tax on LLM foundation companies, figure out how to make sure that people aren't left behind in this next big transformation. Like we already saw a whole bunch of people in rural areas of our country disenfranchised by the move towards an information economy. What are we going to do to prevent that from happening again to another demographic? What are we going to do to make sure that prosperity that's yielded from advancements in AI actually benefits the whole? And look, I'm a capitalist in that I started my own company, I employ people, but there's something to be said about making sure that things don't go off the rails and that everyone and that people aren't left behind. So I would rather our leadership, I look forward to the day when the next generation of leadership is in place and they grew up with understanding both the pros and the cons of AI, as well as to understand that not everything that is posted on social media is actually true.
So I'm going to agree with part of what Don said, and I'm going to have a little bit different answer for part of it as well. I do think, as new technologies emerge, they steer the economy. And as the economy is steered, it steers all of society to some level. And so there is a possibility that this is such a powerful technology shift that it creates a complete rethinking of how we fund society. I don't know that it's going to happen. Not in my lifetime. It's too big a change, something like universal basic income or something's going to happen that has to change. That's a topic for another day. Am I worried about the future leaders not having like cut their teeth on doing this stuff along the way? I'm actually not so concerned about that myself. And I'll tell you why. I think that in the moment, it's hard to divorce ourselves from believing that those skills were important. You know, I tried to teach my daughters to read maps, right? Because I knew how to read a map. But let's face it, they don't need to know how to read a map. They don't need cursive. You can run the largest poultry processing company in the world and never have eviscerated a chicken, right? There are certain skills that feel really, really important and relevant today that they just won't be needed. And so I don't know that that'll make you worse. I think one area where I'm really hopeful is you talked about using these tools. Maybe it's like we're losing some of our mental capacity or mental skills. I'm really hopeful that one area that we're going to get much, much better is at being communicators, because these are just computers. They only will do exactly what you tell them to do. And so to really, really leverage AI, I think you're going to have to be incredibly good at communicating. And if you get good at communicating with the AI, maybe we'll get better at communicating with each other. And I think that's an area I'm very hopeful for. We'll take one last question.
You took a lot of time to talk about prompts, which I appreciate you guys both focusing on that. Thinking back to when you were just very new to the Claude or ChatGPT, this prompt engineering that a lot of people find difficult. What was your go-to prompt at the beginning, and how has it changed from where it is now?
I'm going to give a real general answer to that. My go-to prompts were short prompts initially. What is this? What is that? Solve this for me. How do you do this? And sometimes that's sufficient. I think when I'm trying to solve problems particular to my situation, my prompts are a lot more extensive and detailed about my situation, who I am, what my job description is, what I'm trying to accomplish, and what kind of output I'm hoping to get. And the more specific and extensive I can get in that, the more likely I am to get a usable answer. This is really basic tip, but if you're not doing it, totally use it. Provide it with examples. Case in point, the examples don't necessarily have to be just text. It could be a document. It could be a PDF. So I can't remember the last time I wrote a non-AI assisted proposal, because I basically just provided several of my greatest hits and then a bullet point list of the new material, adapt the tone, the format, pricing structure, scheduling, and then generate something. And then, by the way, I will never use something right out of the gate. I'll always tweak it, adjust it, review it. No one should be committing code or using outputs from LLMs without putting their own imprimatur or their own mark on it to call it their own, because someone, a human being, needs to take responsibility for it. Yeah, that's how my prompting has changed. It's to be a lot more verbose and extensive and detailed.
Thank you so much, Don. Let's thank Don for his contributions.